Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today's topic is going to be about why is game sequels, pretty much sequels for games in general, going bad. I want to start off by talking about, this isn't like targeting any of the games I'm mentioning right now, like this isn't like just directly targeted at them, but it's pretty much like why I believe they're going bad. So let's talk about this for a second. What was it about the originals that really did it for us? It had character, it had quality, and whilst graphics weren't really the best, there were just things about the originals that they just got it right. And while some may say it's nostalgia and we're holding to the past, there's just something that they do that hooks us. You know, there's something that they do that just keeps us playing, right? So I want to talk a bit about, I guess, a couple of sequels that, in my opinion, are just doing it wrong. I want to make sure my volume is down, excuse me. Right now, some sequels that are doing it wrong right now is the COD franchise in general, Destiny 2, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and many other games, I'd like to say. I'm not, like, if I go down the list, this is going to take all day. But I really want to talk about why these games are failing. Short answer is greed. That's the short answer. I always talk about it in my Call of Duty videos about why the game's bad. It's greed. When we make original games, like when you're first making the original product, you're taking a risk. Because you are taking that said risk, you don't really expect and you're not sure if you're going to make money. But there just comes a time that after you begin making money for a product and people believe that you can make a good game, you tend to get a bit cocky and you don't realize that, hey, what I'm making actually might not be a polished product. In COD's case, the games are always ridiculed for feeling exactly the same as the other Call of Duty. But when we mean the same as the other Call of Duty, we mean the same as like the other bad ones. We don't actually mean the same like the good ones. And like I said, it is greed. The vast demand for companies to fill their games with microtransactions has really been destroying games as of late. We've got Battlefront 2 as an example, we got Destiny 2 as an example, and we have supply drops with Call of Duty. You know, all play on the consumer's want of good loot in a way, like cool looking stuff. When we think about Call of Duty, we think about acquiring that diamond camo, we think about acquiring that gold camo. It's that cool looking camo to just boast and say, hey, I got this, you don't. When we think about you know, Destiny, we obviously think about shaders. We think about like fancy shaders for the guns, the ships, you know, to boast. Star Wars Battlefront is essentially, I'm not really familiar with that, but I do know that they have destroyed that game with microtransactions. So I can't really justify the evidence on that as much, but I do know that the first Battlefront did not have nearly as many microtransactions. But what I'm trying to elaborate on is the fact that they're playing on our love of trying to look spiffy, I guess you could say. Our desire to try and look as cool and unique from other players as possible. And they know this. So they put the really cool stuff like behind the paywall, and they make it very, very difficult to get. Basically making the really, really, really unique looking shaders or skins for guns, they put that in the legendary category, making it practically impossible to get. And they basically say, well, you can either grind the game, which is going to take hours, months, who knows how long, depending on how your luck is, or you could constantly buy supply drops with reward money, and that way they get the money and you have a better chance still not 100% chance of getting what you want. And game companies know this, and this is why sequels are not doing it for us anymore, because sequels are made by developers that realize that they have made a good game. So instead of them saying, hey, we made a good game, let's always make sure our games are good, they get cocky and they get puffed up, and they don't really try and take in feedback properly. They say, hey, you love the first game so much, so don't tell us how to do our jobs, essentially. Now, whilst I understand where they're coming from, because the internet nowadays is absolutely toxic. You know, people don't even know how to cuss without proving their point. Like, at least if you're gonna cuss, prove your point. But that doesn't mean that devs should not take in the feedback that we attempt to give them. When we don't give devs feedback, then things just go unnoticed. There are things that a player can see that a dev cannot see, which is why feedback is so crucially important. And as of late, I've really just been seeing games get worse because of lack of feedback from the community. Proper feedback, not just cussing at people and sending them death threats. And basically, them getting away with microtransactions. They're installing them in every game nowadays, and when we look back at the sequels, we say, well, these didn't have microtransactions, so was that the thing? No, it wasn't just a thing. It was the fact that they didn't know if these games would actually make them a substantial amount of money to continue to work on the projects. Now that they know that their games are going to make them enough money for the projects, now they're getting arrogant. And you need to put the devs in their place, not by cussing, but by giving them proper feedback and saying, if you do not change this, I will not support this. It's just that simple. You don't send someone death threats if you want them to change. If you want a football player to get better, you don't tell him to go home and hang himself. You tell him to improve. You tell him to work out, get those miles in daily, stuff like that. You tell them to practice. You give positive feedback, you're more likely to give a positive reaction. It's just that simple. However, I don't know why, but the devs and the community is at fault here, because most communities don't know how to give feedback without cussing. They don't know how to give feedback without essentially sending death threats. And you have to keep in mind that whilst I understand your anger, these are human beings. If you're going to tell me to kill myself, why would I actually want to take the time to, make something good for you? Who's telling me to go hang myself? And while some may say, well, that's really just because they can't handle criticism and feedback, that's really not feedback. You telling someone to go hang themselves and that their family should die in a fire isn't feedback. That's just straight up harassment, in my opinion. And we're basically allowed to get away with that, and I'm not gonna act like I'm defending anyone here, but like I said, positive reinforcement works a lot more than negative reinforcement. And I'm not saying act like they can do no wrong, because I am heavily I heavily criticize Destiny 2, the recent new Call of Duties, and even Star Wars Battlefront for its microtransaction fest. And like I said, it's not, I'm not gonna act like it always works, but it's really because the people who give the proper criticism, let's say, like, they're the majority. Not the majority, the minority. I'm sorry. They are the minority. The people who give the negative criticism are the majority. Devs don't like seeing negative criticism. Not of saying, oh, the game is bad. Straight up just telling people, your game sucks and you don't know how to make games. You should be fired and your family should go homeless. That's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to negative criticism, guys. And before I get someone in the comments saying, well, you shouldn't tell people how to criticize, if you want something to improve, you can't just be saying, oh, just die. Like, think about that. Like, if I suck at math, which I do, and you tell me, TCD, you suck at math, so don't practice math, go home, get a noose, and hang yourself. How am I going to get good at math? Like, how? want to explain it to me? Because I'd love to know. I just don't think that's how that works. And I think a lot of you will agree with me on that. So, how do we fix this, you might ask? Well, fairly simple. We actually give actual feedback based on information that we gather while playing the game. Instead of sending death threats, we send simply devs. I highly disagree with this idea. I also would like to elaborate that devs, just because you can make a good game doesn't mean that you should get cocky. You should always take into account the fact that players should test these games. Not just you, but players in general. Like, a good number of players. And they should tell you, hey, I think this needs to change. Also, community and players in general, I would like to say, just because something is a beta, do not think that you should not criticize it. I get so sick of hearing when people say, hey, it's a beta, it won't be bad, it's a beta, it's the beta, you know, you haven't seen the full product yet. I understand where you're coming from, but you have to understand, that's the time to criticize it while it's a beta, so that the actual game can be a polished product. If you don't criticize the beta, the finished product won't actually be finished, because you did not give proper feedback. So the devs just left stuff in that they really shouldn't have left in, or they should have changed around. This is the reason why sequels are not doing as well as the originals. Devs are getting cocky. Community and players in general do not know how to give proper feedback without death threats, and it's really getting out of control. If something is not done, games are going to continue to decline, and considering the fact that we have to worry about the violent video game controversy already, I really don't think you guys want to have to worry about microtransaction controversies all over the place. The microtransactions need to stop. We really got to start giving, positive feedback, or it's just going to continue to be the slow decline that is games in general right now. They're just slowly declining because of greed of the corporates, lack of feedback, and it's really sad to see. I'm just being honest. It's incredibly sad to see. And I'd really like it if we could just come together, community and devs, and just fix this stuff. Because I don't want to see games die. Games mean a lot to me, and I'm sure they mean a lot to a lot of people. Because when you really think about it, no one wants something that they love taken from them. It doesn't matter if it's a freaking phone or a freaking girlfriend or whatever the heck it is. You don't want it taken from you. So why the heck would we want our video games taken from us? It's just that simple. But really, guys, that's pretty much where I'm probably going to end it off. What did you think about it? What would you like to see in the channel as I continue? Tell me, how do you usually give feedback? Rate the video what you think it deserves. Tell me what you think in the comments below. And I will see all you guys in the next video. Take care.